It comes across as Chris, but everyone here knows me as Robert.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Everybody, welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast, a special off-the-cuff chill stream. Red Pill Religion, where we say politics, culture, and religion always go together and cannot be separated, so you should get used to it and learn how to talk to people who have different viewpoints from you. In these days of social media censorship, please remember you can always find us on redpillreligion.com, which we're reasonably safe is we're certain is safe from most censorship forces. So if we lose you on YouTube here, please find us there. We could use your financial as well as your spiritual support. We take donations via PayPal, Bitcoin, Maker Support, and Bitcoin. We do have a lot of ethical problems with Patreon. Recurring payments and PayPal are always appreciated. Anything you could do is appreciated. So we continue doing what we do. Remember, on redpillreligion.com, we got articles by our volunteers and by submitters. We do accept submissions, videos by us, videos by others. We're here every night, plus extra special videos. Find us on Maker Support. Find us on Gab AI. Find us on Facebook. And if you're a nerd and you just like to talk and you use Discord, please feel free to join us in our Discord chat room. Link is in the low bar. Now, tonight we're joined by, or today, this afternoon, as it happens where I'm at, we're joined by Robert Reed. Now, Robert Reed had come to me as a suggestion from our friend HistoryNet, aka the White Engine. And he had sent me several, and I had, but apparently what caught his attention was this interview that Robert had with Cy Gart over on S.J. Thomason's channel. So we'll start there. How you doing there, Robert?
I'm doing all right, man. How about you?
I'm doing pretty all right. You're thinking about but haven't started your own YouTube channel now? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I got to speak English first. Yeah, I'm hoping to get one up and going here pretty soon.
Well, if and when you get it going, let us know, and we'll let people know about it.
Thank you.
So that they can come find it. Yeah. So I understand you self-identify as an atheist, right?
I'm an atheist.
And you've had run-ins with Christians on Twitter and other social media?
On Twitter, yeah.
On Twitter. You know, Twitter is a war zone. I wound up getting myself banned for life off of Twitter. So I tell you, we have a group account that we post from our blog from, but I don't use it. I'm supposedly not allowed. It gets heated and brutal. What surprised me was with Cy Gart, though, because Cy, who I've known for a while, is one of the sweetest guys, but you wound up getting into a locking horns with Cy?
Yeah, a little bit, and I love the scowl picture. I think you can find one of me smiling. I look like I just smelled something bad in my kitchen. It's okay. I'm joking. It's all good. It's all good. But me and Cy, he sent out a tweet, and I misread it. And it was 100% my fault. And I can't remember what I said, but it was kind of me waving my finger at Cy. Cy took one read at that, and he came back at me. Then I came back at him. And Stephanie, who was in the middle of our back and forth, she kindly suggested you two should have a talk instead. And we both agreed. And it was actually a very marvelous, pleasant talk. And at the end of it, he and I were laughing. It was all good.
I'm glad to hear that. I'd like to see more things like that happening, to be honest. I myself am like Cy, I'm a former atheist who changed his mind. But the thing is I was an atheist for a long time, and I had always maintained friendships with religious people. Mm-hmm. And so, and that was never a problem for me or a difficulty for me.
Sure.
And yet I started getting, I don't even technically do Christian apologetics. I started simply becoming a critic of the atheist community. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised when I started, though, that there do appear to be two types of atheists in the world, which is those who are kind of committed to it as a cause versus those who simply don't care about it or don't get it or aren't interested. And those seem like very distinctly different personality types to me. Where would you say you kind of fall on? You've gotten into arguments with Christians, but then again, some Christians provoke, depending.
I see what you're asking. I would probably say I think the atheists that you're talking about kind of on this end, which I've heard some people talk firebrand atheism, that hardcore, in your face, almost what some would probably call demeaning, name calling, y'all are delusional. I'm not there. I can be. I'm not going to lie. I'm not an angel. I don't have wings on my back or a halo over my head. Right. You know, Max, I think the best way to describe myself is I'm the type of atheist that you get what you give. If you're chill with me, I will be 100% chill with you like I am with Sai. I would much rather just have a conversation. If you're like the street pass that I was telling you about in our pregame show, I'm going to go after your neck because like you and probably like everyone else, I don't want to be disrespected. Right? If I call you and we make the agreement to have a nice conversation and 10 minutes in it, you're insulting my mother, how am I supposed to react to that? So I guess to answer your question, I'm kind of the atheist that you get what you give. If you're kind to me, I will 100% be kind to you. If you're a jerk to me, I'm going to snap your neck.
And we've had plenty of fine interviews like that. Heck, we've got a couple of atheist volunteers on our team. Just because they get it, because there's this. I got into it, and I have a reputation for being a firebrand and from having really fought publicly with some atheists. But on the other hand, I've had some great conversations with people like Coach Red Pill and Academic Agent and Keith Preston and Anton Hill, who are like they see it more or less the same way.
Yeah.
Usually when we go after atheists, we're going after these guys who run in packs. Well, frankly, Twitter is just like a war zone at this point when it comes to that. I mean, people are. They call it they call it the shit posting arena, and that's kind of what it is. That was even when I was on there. I tried to make that a rule too. Like if someone was really going after me, or I was really going them, it was still, hey, you want to stop playing? We can just talk.
Yeah,
that's the way to go. Yeah. Where I come down from, and this is actually what's mattered to me. It's like I said, I never in my life thought I'd do Christian apologetics, and honestly, the only kind I do now are when they come up in other things. My biggest concern has long been, in fact, atheists being rude, condescending, and obnoxious. Mm-hmm. Although I know you do also see that on the Christian side. You mentioned a preacher. I know that tonight we're going to be doing a response video to some guy, Chris Gillum. Who, amongst other things, I am told, I will want to verify this, but I am told thinks we should go ahead and kill gays.
Oh, boy.
And we're going to have a lot of fun with that one because not everybody on the team is Christian, but there's not a single Christian on the team who's on board with that. Neither are our Buddhist friends and our Hindu friends and others on the team. And of course he's going to be claiming that Catholics and Lutherans aren't Christians, so that'll be fun to respond to too. There is a certain breed of Christian that we are known to lock horns with, and I think that that is really the kind who thinks that, and this is going to be your average street preacher too, I would think, is the guy who's got a Bible in his hand and has memorized it real good and can read verses out of it really out loudly, and therefore thinks he's the voice of God.
No argument there.
And it's bone chilling, so that even if as a Christian I think he may have a point about something, the extremity of that kind of approach, I don't know what he thinks it gets them. I don't know what they think they get them. Although I think they have a theology that.
I'm going to tell you something. You and I are going to 100% agree on this. I used to be a hardcore Christian. I did. Sorry about that. My dogs are in the background. I went to church. I lived at church. I was taught to memorize that Bible. We tapped on people's shoulders to tell them they were wrong if they didn't agree with us. And I think you got something there in terms of the more you can talk and the louder your voice is, kind of the more correct you are. And that kind of makes you especially if I can shoot like 5 Bible verses at you in a row, like a machine gun. Absolutely. And the average person doesn't know the Bible like that. And so if you quote XYZ from Deuteronomy, the average person is not going to know what the hell you're talking about. They're just going to sit there with their thumb up their butt, and their inability to kind of shoot back at you makes you feel superior as the Christian, or in my case, when I was a Christian. And so, yeah, I think you're onto something there, 100%.
Yeah, it's almost a form of numerology too. Deuteronomy 23:9. Boom! I win.
Boom. Yeah, absolutely. And if they can't checkmate you right away, you walk away with your hands up like you just scored a touchdown. So absolutely. And I tip my hat to you, man, because I'm going to be honest with you. I listened to some of your stuff before I got on, because I always like to do a little homework. And, you know, I hear people kicking up dust at you kicking up dust at them. But in this regard, it sounds like you're very fair, and that you will go after what you think would be a wayward atheist, just like you would go after what you think is a wayward Christian. And if I'm reading you right, then my hat's off to you. Much respect.
We are probably going to do more of that. We have been reluctant to mix it up with other Christians, but we've kind of wanted to be open to everybody, right? I mean, we don't want to be hypocrites, because we really do. We really welcome in Buddhists, we welcome in Jews, we welcome in Muslims. Yes, shh, shh, shh. Muslims sometimes. Shh, shh. You know, deists, you know, atheists who aren't jackholes, and we like talking about philosophical issues, scientific issues, history issues.
Sure.
But we have had Christians coming after us, and so at some level we have to define ourselves as to what kind of Christian are we going to be.
Right.
And we pretty much settled on various schools of what are called Christian orthodoxy. I don't know if you know much about it, but I mean, like, what kind of Christian tradition did you come out of? I mean,
I was kind of half Baptist, half Catholic.
Half Baptist, half Catholic. Well, that doesn't even work.
Well, no, it doesn't. When we were back in Louisiana, you know, my mom's side was Catholic, so when you're with her side of the family, you did the routine. All that kind of stuff. My dad's side was Baptist, and so when we were with his family, then guess what? With all that stuff came out, and so you're right. It's somewhat of a headache trying to keep up with both sides, but you know, you did what you had to do. You did what your parents said, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, and when they said we're going to go to this church, and that's exactly where you went.
I have good friends who are Baptists. I disagree with them a lot, but you know, the ones who are, I think proper Christians can take hanging around someone who disagrees with them theologically. The ones who aren't mature can't take it, because really Catholicism and baptism are pretty different religions. They really are.
Yeah.
But see, we're not Catholic apologetics either necessarily. What we focus on is Christian orthodoxy generally, which we do define pretty broadly. So it would include not just Catholics, but the Eastern Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, the Coptics, to a certain extent the Anglicans, depending on the type of Anglican, even certain types of Protestants. Which actually, although they're not a majority in the United States, these types of Christians are the majority worldwide.
Okay.
And what we all adhere to, even some Lutherans, although we're kind of getting in the edges into Protestantism there, but even some Lutherans, definitely many Anglicans, all these other branches, including the Catholics, all hew to something called the deposit of the faith. And the deposit of the faith is believed to be the oral teachings and practices and traditions passed down orally to go with the Bible. To go into more depth, we actually believe that has precursors in the Pharisees and the oral law kept by the Pharisees. We think that was transferred to the apostles and in the book of Acts. That they were when they laid hands on whatever his name was to add to their number to replace Judas, and added others to their numbers. What we believe, which is not what Baptists believe and other Bible Christians believe, what we believe is that our bishops all come from there.
Yeah.
Like when they added to their numbers, they added the word apostle and the word bishop are the same basic word in Greek. And so when they added new apostles to their numbers, they were beginning to make the beginning bishops. Okay. And so within all these traditions, even the Lutherans, to be a valid bishop, you have to have had that. You have to have had hands laid on you and be ordained a bishop by another bishop who was in turn ordained by another bishop that you can credibly think goes all the way back to Pentecost.
Okay.
That's what they all think. Now, no Protestant denomination except maybe the Lutherans has that. And so that's kind of where our tradition stems from. And what this means now with and if I'm boring you on all of this, let me know.
No, hit me. I'm learning.
Because the Baptist, and I'll say the Baptist, but let's call other Protestants or Bible Christians, what they believe in is ultimately some variation of what is called sola scriptura, which is that the scriptures alone are sufficient and alone are authoritative. Some don't even know the term sola scriptura, but that's what they've been raised to believe their whole life. And what all the Orthodox type Christians believe is that no, it is the Bible is big, it is complicated, it is easily misunderstood, and I can find you many Bible verses to back up that the Bible itself says this.
Yeah.
And so you need an authoritative interpreter. You need somebody who's steeped in the teachings and the practices and who knows and is reasonably authoritative, which is what the bishop's supposed to be.
Okay.
And furthermore, it tends to add heavily on precedent. So, like, if a decision was made 600 years ago, we're not changing it now. Or if a decision was made 1,000 years ago, we're not changing it now, and the bishop doesn't get to either. So, like, one of the things we'll be accused of, and this can't happen, but like, we'll be accused of just following the traditions of men and following whatever these men say. But it's actually a more complicated dynamic between the lay believer and the bishop. The priests make bishops, so the priests are sort of junior bishop, if you want. It's much more of a dialogue, right? Because if a bishop says something is wrong, or a priest says something is wrong, your obligation is to speak up and say, sir, that's not so. You're wrong.
Okay.
So it's actually, there's this idea that, you just slavishly obey the priest. And of course you can have a priest or a bishop who's being a bully, who's being off the mark, who's saying, you got to do this because X, but we're able to call them back out because they have to be able to cite precedent. Like, is that actually authoritative church teaching that just came out of your mouth, sir, or is that just your opinion?
So that's on all matters of the Bible? Like,
let me think about the question on all matters. Yeah, final authority for interpretation of scriptures will fall to the bishops. So if you don't agree, the bishop wins. Except, of course, if you still think he's wrong, you can escalate that. If you see what I mean. It's much more of a dynamic of all right, well, I will listen to what you're saying now, but I still think you're wrong. And there's many channels you can go through. You contact the archdiocese, you contact the other bishops, whatever is going on. It does tend to be very legalistic, to be honest, but it gets down to, when Christ said, for example, eat my flesh, drink my blood, what does that mean? We have that as the answer. There's the standard church teaching answer that we believe we've had for 2,000 years. We can cite precedents and say, and just like St. Augustine said here back in the 400s, and just like so-and-so said here, and just like so-and-so said here, this is the proper interpretation. Because it's just like, so your priest is really like more like going to and this is a good way of looking at it too, more like going to your doctor or your lawyer. They're there to be the expert opinion and to render certain services, like the sacraments. But I mean, like, you can get a lousy lawyer who gives you a bad opinion.
Sure.
You can get a lousy doctor who gives you a bad diagnosis, and you can get a lousy priest who gives you bad advice or gives you a wrong answer. It's more like it's a professionalized system, and it's supposed to be more accountable, because you don't get just some priest has a Bible in his hand and the ability to shout some verse numbers louder. Right. He's got training. He knows what the proper church teaching is. And even on something like this, I mean, harassing people doesn't do any good. Street preachers can be incredibly obnoxious. You're probably never going to run into an Anglican or a Lutheran street preacher or a Christian or a Catholic street preacher. Not very often, anyway.
So let's say there's two authorities. One's in Denver, the other one's in San Antonio, Texas. Are they getting the same information? So someone beneath them asks them similar questions. Will they be able to hand down the same answer?
That's the goal. Actually, the goal is that just like a good lawyer or just like a good doctor, that you should get the same answer from every priest. Now, I mean, there's always going to be situations where two priests don't agree. But really, I mean, it takes 5 years to become a priest, and you are taught quite a bit. You're taught like you actually wind up having to get a master's degree. And then if you want to get into something more specialized, you wind up like you can go to exorcism school after you get your priesthood, if you want to be an exorcist kind of thing. But it's all it's scholarly. Some people say we're too scholarly and we miss the spirit of the whole thing. But it's like on any given theological question that you've probably ever heard, there is either a standard response that everybody knows, or there's a standard range of responses that you can find out to explain, what is this about? And so it's even like, let's say we've got some idiot, and I will call him an idiot, who's out there saying that Levitical law should be taken literally, or that when St. Paul said, this verse is taken out of context, and I'll explain why. When St. Paul says, for example, I agree that the gays he doesn't say the gays, but men who do that are disgusting, they should be put to death. Well, what does that actually mean? Actually, if you go to the very next verse, he then tells everybody else present that they deserve death too. So if you're reading it right, it doesn't come out the way people think. But what was I sort of saying? When you go into something like, they used to call it catechism or catechesis or instruction, your more Orthodox Christians don't start with the Bible. They understand with the basic fundamentals of how you understand the faith. And then we go into the Bible to start exploring it and seeing, because I mean, we think what we're doing is all consonant with the Bible, but we do understand the Bible is easy to misread. And so, and anytime a Christian is taking a position even out of the Bible, let's say he's quoting a passage out of the Bible, he should be double checking himself, double checking somebody else who's knowledgeable and saying, are the words coming out of my mouth actually correct? And it all should be done in a spirit of, humility. Threatening people with hellfire and all that. I don't know. To me, that's it's bullying and it's irresponsible.
I agree. Can I ask, so I became an atheist at 39. I'm 46 now. And the main reason was simply, one, I didn't believe, and two, I could never get my questions answered, right? It started off in Sunday school. True story when I tell you, we were learning about Noah's Ark, and I asked the Sunday school teacher, because it just made sense, what did Noah do with all that poop? There's 8 people. Yeah. And that's usually the response I get, because it just made sense. 8 people, there's a whole bunch of animals. That's a lot of waste. She told me I couldn't ask about poop. That was, disrespectful and all this other stuff. Oh, sorry, cat.
Can't ask?
And I kept asking, and she told me, and at the time I was 10 or 11. She told me if I kept asking those questions, I was going to go to hell, and asked me to leave the Sunday school. And just the more I ask questions, kind of the more I kind of get stiff-armed or the whatnot. So I'm going to ask you a question as the atheist, and it's a serious question.
Sure.
There seems like a lot of steps to translate that Bible. 5 years just to become a priest. We hope the 2 guys or 2 women or however it works kind of give the same answers to similar questions. This seems like some really important stuff. And let's say you're right and I'm 100% wrong. There is a God, and the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ and the blood sacrifice. That's a really, 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 really important proposition. Why didn't God just come down and tell us now versus, thousands of years ago when we didn't have reliable forms of recording and passing word on? Because I mean, if the end of the world is tonight, I'm toast. there's a whole lot of us that aren't going to make the final cut. So, why go through pastors and priests and bishops and deacons? Why not just come down and say, hey, here's the truth?
All right, now that is a good question.
Thanks.
That's a good question. Now, let me think carefully about this. Not every Christian is going to like my answer either. So part of the problem I see there is that I do not believe that salvation is a simple matter of whether or not you accept an intellectual proposition.
Okay.
Now that just put me at odds with a whole lot of Christians, including some possibly listening. That is rooted in a Protestant doctrine called sola fide, which I mostly reject. It depends on how you phrase it, but I mostly reject, just like I reject sola scriptura. But in the usual sola fide version of salvation, it's all John 3:16, right? God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that everyone who should believe in him should be saved. And Jesus says, whoever believes you will be saved, blah blah blah. But we think these are being taken out of context, and that it really doesn't rest on an intellectual proposition. Let me put it to you this way, and there's some, you've maybe even heard the opposite of this from some Christians, but I'm quite certain that there are some people going to church every week who are going and aren't sure in what they believe, but they aren't sure what they believe, but they like what they're hearing. They like the lifestyle. They like the values. They want to be good. They aren't sure they really believe this crap, but this all means something to them. I actually think that person has a much better, they're in a better position than than a lot of guys who are up there 100% confident in their faith and shouting it to the rooftops. I further do not believe God condemns people who are ignorant, who just haven't heard, who've been confused and lied to. I don't believe it's that simple at all. I mean, in a certain way, it is, because I truly believe the person in their heart who's looking for God and looking to be right, if you look into not just what the Catholics teach, but the Eastern Orthodox, the Assyrian Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, all those guys, it's like, we know it's a complicated thing and it's all up to God. So, and actually in Catholic circles, although you'll get some hard-ass Catholics who will say, there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, got to be Catholics. Other Catholics will point out and say, no, church teaching is very clear. If you tell somebody they're going to hell, you've just committed a heresy. You have no such right to an opinion to make such a declaration. What is it we like to say? God respects his sacraments, but is not limited by them. Right. I truly don't believe the ignorant and all them, and the totally. I mean, I was completely confused for the longest time. And actually, when I left my atheism behind, I still wasn't sure I believed. But I did actually what Pascal suggested. If you ever heard of Pascal's
wager.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually look into Pascal's wager, he's a lot more sympathetic than he's sometimes portrayed, because he did believe in God. And he even published proofs as to why he believed in God. But he said, for the people who just aren't getting it, his argument was, just go and live the life of the Spirit and try to learn and try to understand, and eventually you'll understand. And I kind of had an experience like that. I knew I didn't. Well, I haven't gotten back to your question though. So let me get back to your question. Why didn't he make it so easy? That one. Why didn't he make it easier? I mean, like, why don't we just have him show up to us when we're born or when we hit 12 years old or whatever and say, hi, here I am.
Sure.
This is what I want you to do. Here's a list of instructions. I'll check you later. I'll check in later. Whatever it is, right? Why don't we have something like that? And I wish we did. My life would have been easier. So I have to admit that is the hardest thing in the question. In the Christian question specifically, except the understanding of God that I have is that, God is the ultimate intelligence that's running things. God is the intelligence that's running the laws of probability in physics. God is the one that's, when we say this, the seen and the unseen, God is running the laws of physics, for example.
Okay.
And God is running the laws of probability. That's why they work. That's why they go that way. God, in other words, is the great rule setter for all of it. So in a sense, like, for example, if you take your car and drive it 100 miles an hour into a wall, you're going to know what's going to happen to you probably. And that's because you broke, I mean, in a theological sense, you broke God's laws. You attempted to break the laws of physics. It didn't work out so good for you, did it?
No.
And that's kind of similarly how we see sin. We do think, and I can give you research on this, that virtually all human beings are imbued with what's called a natural sense of God. Right. That's how Catholics and others describe it, which is this inarticulate sense that most children have, that there's something intelligent running things. A book I can recommend you on that, let me see if I can pull it up here on the Amazon account, is by a search psychologist, Jared Barrett, called Born Believers. Now, he's some kind of Episcopalian, I think, but whatever. He's a completely valid research psychologist. And for thousands of years, people have talked about, like in the Western tradition, we called it the sensus divinatus, that natural sense that there's something. And Barrett and his research psychologists found that this is a sense that develops in most children between the ages of 2 and 4, that something bigger than us is running things. And actually, it turns out that the children tend to develop it on their own right around the time they're developing language, regardless of whether or not they're in a religious home. There are exceptions, usually homes involving, actually, a lot of autistics wind up without this natural sense. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And kids from really broken homes, they tend to lose it. But it's a natural sense. So as a partial answer to your question, this does not in any way get anybody to Jesus, right? Okay. But it does give you that we are born with this sense that there's something like that out there, that some kind of intelligent thing is running things. And by the way, the kids themselves, without much help, can distinguish that from monsters under the bed or an imaginary friend. So, I mean, you can read Barrett's book if you want to look more.
I just wrote it down.
Yeah. And while I'm there, then I'll give you an even more provocative one by another research psychologist called Faith of the Fatherless. By the way, this matched me. Now, Paul Vitz is a research psychologist too, who goes into great deal on this because we're at an interesting point in history. We haven't had so many publicly identified out atheists to look at. And so, you know, he's done a number of surveys of the atheist population. This is actually kind of leading up to how I got where I am. If you think I'm wandering, let me know.
So what is this one about? Faith of the Fatherless?
Yeah, it's a survey of what, it's a demographic look at what atheists are like.
What do we like according to this book?
Okay, and we would have counted me. We are overwhelmingly white. That's not you, but
no, it is not.
But more to the point, but actually it does break out racially. Blacks are the least likely, and whites and Asians are the most likely, but whatever. More interesting though, and more compelling is overwhelmingly white. I'm sorry, overwhelmingly male at greater than 90%, and overwhelmingly come from broken homes or have bad relationships with their fathers. Over 90%. Which stunned me when I read it, because I was reading me, by the way. I came from a real bad household. I mean, bad relationship with dad, bad relationship with stepfather. I won't even get into it. But it was fascinating reading it because I could see it. Because what I had concluded when I decided, you know, atheism is not going to work for me. I just doesn't work. I don't, and it was multiple reasons. But what really got me was that religion generally, human spirituality generally, appeared very much to me to be an evolved human trait.
Okay.
That is, the story we're told is that it's primitive people who just don't understand science and logic and evidence, and they're dumb and all that. But I don't buy that. Even when I was an atheist, and I probably got some luck here because I got friends in other religions besides Christian, right? So I had a pretty broad. Plus, I took a comparative studies class in college and a religious studies class just to. I could tell there was something more to spiritual belief, and more to the point that people needed it. It became, and this was more than 10 years ago for me, that people needed it. That we had evidence that religion was part of things going back at least 30,000 years, if not further. That people believed in the spiritual, and that every society and every culture has religions. Well, if they're going to be Christian or not, they all do. And I concluded, so we evolved a natural sense of something that's ubiquitous in humans and is found in every society, but we are to determine that this is a delusion and stupidity.
No.
And that's what I concluded. And
Okay.
that really just being completely I'm not saying you, but that was me. It was like this level of complete dismissal doesn't work. There has to be something here, and it's probably more than psychology. Although even early on, I was saying things to myself like, well, maybe we're just hitting primitive neurochemical pathways in our brain to access these ancient ancestral things. But I decided they're important. We're born with them. I should explore this. And that's kind of where I began exploring. And so, I mean, I guess I would say as a partial answer to your question, it did appear to me at the time, and now I've got research to back me up, that if you believe in evolution, we evolved a need for this. I can even go into other studies and things I've seen on what happens to the completely anti-religious, non-religious population, and I'll show them to you. But literally, atheists really are more likely to be depressed, suicidal, drug addicted, and to have a pattern of broken relationships. I know that's pisses people off when I say it, but they do, and it did match my life. So I'm sorry.
Well, no, I feel you. It's I've heard that one before, and there's a lot of information you threw at me. I wonder if there was a study showing the exact opposite. What would the other side say?
Well, yeah, there's where you get in on it, because what I would call organized atheism, the atheist movement, has a lot of things that they like to study and cite. Some I think can be debunked. Some maybe they're worth debating. I'm more getting, and so maybe this is all too, we don't need. You can check it out. We can come back and talk about all this later too.
Sure.
This was my conclusions based on what I was
saying.
And
I dig it.
This looked like functional, healthy social behavior, and behavior that actually worked well for people. And I could see it in my own life, not in everybody. But I mean, I would say I was religiously abused as a child. Mm-hmm. But I could see, just looking at it scientifically, people are getting something out of this. This is working for them. Some of them are obviously way off on a nut and in something dysfunctional. But some of them are just really decent, healthy, normal people that I really appreciate in my life. And that's just made me think, okay, I'm going to give up the atheism. I'm going to assume that spiritual people in general got something going on.
And what if that it is just a sense of community? What if that it of these people are healthier, they're stronger, maybe more mentally stable? What if it's because they have a community? What if the atheist depression, suicide rate, I've heard people say this before, is a result of being an outcast? Like, take, for instance, gay people. And I'm not putting you in this category, but the gay teen suicide rate is off the chart. If I'm not mistaken, they are the number one, most likely, in American demographics to take their own lives. Some Christians will say, well, that's the Holy Spirit convicting them, when in fact, it's that horrid sense of isolation, right? No one likes me. Why am I even here? So what if the atheist depression rate, suicide rate, mental illness, whatever you want to call it, is from the isolation?
Well, you've opened up a couple of different questions here, which I think are fair.
My take on it. First off, I mean, I've got a conflicted relationship these days with gay rights because I've been attacked just for the crime of being a Christian, which really bothers me since I've always been pro gay rights. And by the way, a lot of Christians already were. I did want to get that out. My own Catholic church ran all the AIDS hospices during the AIDS crisis, and well, anyway. Now I lost track of my train of thought.
I hit on
I
gay
wanted to
teens.
get this out too, which is that if you look into the gay question, and it's important, Derek, our gay atheist friend, will be on with us tonight. Gay. You've always got to be careful because I don't want to offend anybody, but
I feel you.
if you look at scientific studies that have been done, I'm not going to whip them out now, but anybody who wants them, I'll go get them for you. There have been a number of studies that have found that human beings, a certain percentage of human beings, a sizable portion, maybe like 25, 30%, just naturally have a complete, regardless of any religious convictions they have at all, have a natural strong aversion to homosexuality. Or homosexual behavior, and certain other kinds. They squick at it just like they squick at certain bad foods or whatever, and that's a natural reaction in humans, and a lot of humans, which is, I think, something that gay people ought to contemplate more, especially at least if they're being mean about it. Like, if there's a born that way thing, there is also, you can't just put it on religious people, the gay thing, is what I'm trying to say. In fact, if you go out there and look at some atheist thinkers, and some of the things some of them have said about gays, like go read what Ayn Rand said sometime. It's, completely intolerant, completely nasty. So now to the question of social isolation, like you get kicked out of the house, you get kicked out of the family, you use your whole community because you say you're an atheist. That could absolutely be a contributor. I would be doubting that it's the only contributor, though, because I myself was an atheist for too long and I knew too many atheists. And it's like, I didn't suffer the extreme ostracization and I was still an atheist. Yet I did have I struggled big time with nihilism, with moral relativism, of not knowing what the right thing to do was, of thinking I had done the right thing, only to have things blow up in my face. As life's complications build up, I got more and more frustrated and depressed and nihilistic and hopeless. Coming to God did help me with that. So, I mean, it can be some of both. I'm not, but I do think accepting the atheist proposition, and this is where I eventually got, accepting the atheist proposition at some point.
What's the atheist proposition?
That there is no God there, and which almost always entails the belief that there's no afterlife.
If I may, on that one, I think generally I would speak for atheists when I would say it's not the hardcore belief that there is no. I actually had a lady ask me this morning, "What if you're wrong?" And I told her I could absolutely be wrong. I'm not making the claim. Well, how about this? I'll speak for myself. Robert Reed is not saying that there is no God. Max, you could, maybe you're the key. Maybe you're the one person to show me if I just would have moved the decimal point over just one integer, bam, I could become a Christian in the next 60 seconds. So I'll never tell you that I believe that there is no God. So the atheist proposition that you speak of, I'll speak for myself. That's not me.
Okay. Well, I oddly enough, I wouldn't even trust it if you said, "Oh, I'm coming to Jesus now." I wouldn't even trust it.
That's fair enough. Fair enough.
You'd be overexcited about something. I honestly, this is the process that, there's this thing in the Bible. No, I'm getting inarticulate. The idea that there is a God of some sort, and that there is some reality higher than this one, or lower for that matter, beyond this one, that we can talk to, is a belief that you can, and that most people come to on their own without ever accepting Christ. I think that honestly, if you don't already think it's rational to think there's a God, I honestly do not know why you would read the Bible. I read the Bible as an atheist. I did not like it. I found God incomprehensible. I found the stories disjointed. I found Jesus, quite frankly, baffling and crazy and scary quite a bit of the time. And I truly believe it's just because I was reading it from the wrong angle. The Christian tale, as I understand it, you know, and as most of us understand it in the more Orthodox Christians, is no, not that Jesus was God, but that not that a man became God, but that God chose to become a man. That's kind of the first idea, that God's already there. That God is the invisible intelligence that's running everything. The intelligence that undergirds the laws of probability, the ultimate logic by which the universe runs. That's Jesus is the divine logos, and that like logic itself, intelligence itself, decided to take human form in the incarnation of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that's an important proposition. Well, if you don't even have a decent idea of what God would be, the story just seems baffling. And so I usually say get to the idea of God first and see if that even that makes sense to you. And then after that, start looking at various religious claims and see if you think any of them add up. I actually openly encourage people to explore Taoism, to check out what the Shintoists are really all about. Sikhism, look into it, because these guys all share the same fundamental idea with the Abrahamic faith, that some ultimate intelligence is running things. When you get there, all of a sudden, then the Christian message in particular, to me, immediately becomes more intelligible. All right, so this ultimate intelligence running things decided to come on down and talk to us. And he is the ultimate intelligence running the universe, but he's decided to become a man and come on down here and talk to us and tell us some things. Then all of a sudden, a lot of the gospel tales make more sense.
Well, I read the Bible as a Christian, and I've read it as an atheist. How did it read wrong? Different? I'm sorry?
Well, how do they read much different to you?
No, they're about the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have the same questions I had at 15 that I do in my mid-40s.
Well, like I said, learning about the deposit of the faith really helped me a lot, because those of us who are deposit of the faith Christians do not believe the Bible is self-explanatory. We do not believe the Bible explains itself. We don't believe that if you're just right in the Holy Spirit that you'll be guided to read it rightly. We don't believe any of that, that there is a scholarly, ancient, and sacred tradition that goes into how you approach any particular text. And that always provides an interpretive lens and a context through which you could speak layers. And so beyond that, you'd have to give me specific examples. And by the way, I'm not the particular Bible guy, so I mean,
I'm not going to put you on the spot and
Bible quotes. I'll get into them, and I'll get reasonable.
But so another question is, because I've got a little note here, then who's right? And I've asked this before. As now I'm an atheist, do I listen to Max? Or do I listen to this person over here? Because I've been told, well, just read the Bible. It'll all be clear. I know you're an atheist now. Just start at page 1, get yourself to the last page. It'll be clear. And now I'm hearing something different. And so as the outsider, who do I listen to?
Oh, dude, reading the Bible made me an atheist. So I don't. It did. I heard that line. I remember.
No. Yeah, I've heard it too.
I found nothing. This is past tense, but I found nothing particularly compelling there. I just didn't. And so, well, who do we believe? That was actually my big question when I eventually said, all right, for a number of reasons, Christianity is calling me. What kind of Christian am I going to become? And so what I looked for was, how do I avoid, do I believe this guy? Do I believe that guy? Do I believe this one? Do I believe that one? My research, that's where I, came into Christian orthodoxy generally in the lower O terms.
And that's where, like, let's just take our Eastern Orthodox brothers. They've been separated from us for 1,000 years. But they still have priests they call father. They still have sacraments. They still have liturgical calendars. They still have liturgy. And on like 99 out of 100 questions, if you would ask what a particular Bible section is like, you're going to get the same answer, because, you know, we have these things called catechisms, which are, you know, basically distilled, you know, here's the basic truths that we believe. That's what the creeds are for. That's what defined dogmas are actually for. You think dogmas are a bad thing, but a dogma is when, you know, the church authorities have said, look, this is what we believe. This question is settled. It is now dogma. And if you want to question it, well, you can question it and stay in the church, or you can leave, but we're not changing it because, you know, we established this in 1200. We established this in the year 300, whatever it was at this council or that council. So what you get when you enter one of the Orthodox traditions is you get a buffer against that. Your buffer is that they've gone through formal training. They've learned the dogmas, the doctrines, the practices. They are accountable, and they will mostly give you the same answer, at least insofar as the same way that the average lawyer will give you the same answer to most things, or the average doctor will give you the answer to. In other words, they're learned, they're experienced, we know. So I don't have to take my priest's word for it, what transubstantiation means. I can go to authoritative church sources and read it, you know, or whatever it is. So the institutional church, which gets all the bashing, but I'm going to say it's not even just for the Catholics, because others can say this too. Listen, we are keeping our histories. We can go back. We can say this is what we taught 500 years ago. This is what we taught 800 years ago. This is what we taught 50 years ago. It's still what we teach. It's what I got taught. It's still what we teach. So what you have is constancy of teaching and constancy of interpretation. And what I find that also tends to get you is it's that kind of approach lends itself to other things. In fact, I believe that systematic approach is also what got us to the Bible, is also what got us had a lot to do with why our system of law developed the way they did, and even the way our system of science developed the way it did. It was this process of, you know, what Christians in the Orthodox traditions believes is that the bishops in whole are going to be the ones who, led by the Holy Spirit, keep the teachings correct and don't change them, and keep the practices correct and don't change them, at least the things that aren't allowed to change. So, so if you become a Coptic Christian, for example, you're not taking my word for it. You're not taking an individual priest's word for it, at least not long term. You're taking the word of the whole church, which has published documents and has bishops of people who can give you the questions. So at least, and that was what was so important for me as an atheist, because I had experienced so many different people with so many different opinions. And, you know, then you discover orthodoxy and say, what is the answer to this question? They'll say, this is the answer to how you interpret that. This is what that means. This is why this is. This is how you do it. This is what Joshua is all about. The book of Joshua was all about, and how we're to interpret it as Christians today. This is what this part of Deuteronomy is about. This is why we accept this part of Deuteronomy still as literally true, and that part of Deuteronomy is not literally true. It's institutional, so it doesn't wind up being all up to one guy and his opinions.
And maybe you answered this already, but how do they decide which part isn't true versus which one is it, or metaphor, let's say?
Well, what do we take as metaphor? Well, I don't like the word metaphor, because the Bible's got history in it. It's got poetry in it. It's got.
Oh yeah, I'm just quoting.
It's got deeply spiritual stuff too. That's more than metaphor. And how do you decide? You know, again, usually we look at what's been decided at the great ecumenical councils. And what has been written by the saints that are universally recognized as a saint, like St. Augustine and others. We have figures that are called the doctors of the church, most of whom are saints. If you look into the doctors of the church, they are guys who looked at really hard questions that everybody was debating,
or confused by and published answers to, and answers that wind up becoming, universally accepted. Well, if you're somebody like that, like Origen or Augustine, then you'll likely get a title of Doctor of the Church, probably after you die. But so, like, I guess you could say it's a legalistic process, sort of like courts draw on case law for precedent and stuff like that. Because I mean, you're going to hear that kind of answer all the time out of a Catholic or another Orthodox. Oh yeah, well, Saint Basil, Saint Cyril in 633 said this, and nobody's ever disputed him since then. So yeah. And that does rebel against the individualist spirit of, well, that guy was wrong and I'm right. But from our more orthodox perspective, it's like, really? Okay, we've all understood it this way for 1,400 years, but you're the clever boy who's got the right we can get skeptical back. Really, you think you've got a better read? Okay, why? So and so said this 1,600 years ago. Ain't nobody ever given him a good answer since. Why are you changing it now? And that whole thing forms we think the Bible is part of something bigger called the deposit of the faith. It's like the central cornerstone document, but there's all this add-on stuff that like your Baptists and your Bible Christians don't have. So they're stuck with the Bible, and just from a personal reference with the Bible alone, man, you can pull any crazy out of there that you want. You name the crazy, I'll pull it out of there for you.
Sure.
So I mean, that's why I trust orthodoxy. That's why I've even gotten into arguments with priests, because like, man, what you just said is wrong. But because I know what he just said is wrong, and I can call him on. I mean, not that I'm habitually doing that, right? But at the same time, I know ultimately that priest has years of training, and I can usually trust him for a good opinion. And I can check with other people if I don't think he's given me the right opinion, and I can check with other sources. So does that answer the question more or less?
Yeah, I can dig it.
Like I said, if you think of the priest like a lawyer or a doctor, it goes snap. Oh, I get it. He could be incompetent or stupid or vile or whatever, but odds are better that the guy with the law degree knows what he's talking about than the guy who doesn't.
And I dig your answer. I see where you're coming from, but through all the doctrine of the faith, the steps you have to take, a lot of it still justifies what I'm going to say logic. And so I would still have to wrap my mind around stuff that didn't make sense when I was 15 and doesn't make sense now.
We're not going to resolve this now.
No. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying Max, turn me over right now. I mean, it's still.
I have my wife needs me to go and let her into the house. Can we just pause this for a minute?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, man. Do a dance, sing for the audience. Just kidding.
They don't want me to do that.
I apologize, everybody.
You guys talk amongst yourselves. Ooh, sorry. Here, Copper, say hello to the people. What are you doing? All right, fine. Here.
Hey guys, okay, we should probably actually wrap this up. I try not to go over an hour, and we've already gone over an hour.
All good.
I think maybe we should just wrap it up, but we can have more conversations like this, or invite you to another stream another time.
Always around.
Oh, that's and let us know when you get a. Excuse me, I'm a bit out of breath. I had to run and get the order and everything. I think the biggest thing I've wanted to see for the longest time, and don't get me wrong, I've been a shit poster and a fire breather, okay? The biggest thing I've wanted from the atheist community for the longest time is more just sitting and having conversations like this. And like, really, I don't view it as my business to make you join my religion. I would want you to be curious and want to know more. I might offer things, but I don't believe you chase people down, knock people's doors, threaten them with hellfire, act like you rule over them because you've got a Bible in your hand. I can't stand any of that. And I understand atheists who object to that. Just as I'm sure you object to atheists who run around and constantly act like they're superior human beings to everybody else, and religious people are ruining everything. And it's not, because one thing that's for sure, religion isn't going away. It will not go away. It won't.
Agree.
And so you got to learn to live with people. I know I'm kind of changing the subject, but we're kind of wrapping it up. I was at one point in my life homeless. I had already become a Catholic, although I was very, uncertain in my faith, but whatever. But I was homeless, and a Mormon family took me in. Now, Mormon is a very different, really very, very different religion. It really is, with a lot of disagreements. In fact, they believe some things about Catholics that would get us into a fight, but they knew I was Catholic. I knew I was a Mormon. They were Mormon. They were incredibly sweet. They were incredibly kind. They invited me exactly one time to go to a Bible study session with the Mormons, and I said no, thank you, and I never heard another word again. Next door was a Hindu couple from India who were great friends with these Mormons that I was living with, and who were so kind to me and so helpful to me. I had lost everything, and I was a complete mess. And these Hindus and these Mormons were so good to me. For a period of about a year of my life. And I can't lose that experience. I can't ever lose that, regardless of what our religious differences are, good people are everywhere. And
I agree.
We need to be able to get along.
I would 100% echo your sentiment. And I think I can speak, at least for some of the atheists I've interacted with on YouTube. They would want the exact same thing from their Christian brothers and sisters, and that is to come on a channel, have a decent back and forth, and
well,
at the end.
And in the end, it is like what I said. Religion, politics, and culture go together. They really do. There are these people who think they're either going to make one religion for everybody, which isn't going to work, or they're going to wipe it all out, which also is not going to work, or you learn to get along with people. And that's kind of what I always hope for.
I said this to Stephanie, and I know you got to wrap it up, but I said this to Stephanie after our first ever coffee talk. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing, but we shouldn't disrespect, right? And I think you're right. I think you actually nailed it in the very beginning. They are intertwined, and they're not going away. And if that's just a stone cold fact, Max, I'd much rather hug you around your neck than punch you in your stomach. So
that works for me.
Yeah, I would, and I say that to any Christian that's out there listening. I feel the same way about you. You don't come hard at me, I won't come hard at you. Or let me be positive. You be nice to me, I'll be nice to you. And you're right. I would much rather have conversations like this than all out firefights. They bore me.
All right, Robert Reed. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I suspect,
man,
we're going to probably get you on another stream again because this was fun.
All right.
All right, everybody, just watch for that. A whole bunch of us are going to take down Preacher Man Chris Gillum tonight, so that should be fun. Maybe some of the atheists who hate us will enjoy watching us do that because it should be fun. And otherwise, everybody, please find us on redpillreligion.com. Please feel free to join our Discord chat room too. Here on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and God bless everybody, even you godless heathens.